Welcome to Liberation Dialogues, Decolonization, Reparations, and New World Making, a conversation with Mireille, Fanon, and France, and Chevy Eugene. Before I introduce them, I'd like to do some housekeeping items. Some of you have already partake of our limited refreshments out there, so I appreciate that. Please make sure you consume the goods, because purchasing things at the houses with Aramat is not a simple or cheap business. The other point as well, that the bathrooms are out there somewhere, okay? So I appreciate that. And I presume I do not have to give some fire regulations. You know, or if something will happen, all of it take a look. Okay? I'd also like to point out that very graciously, Fanon Books has actually graced us with a book table, and I encourage you to go out and look at what they have on offer. Many of those things have to deal with some of the topics we're talking about: coloniality, decolonization, what does this mean in terms of transforming the world, particularly in the Canadian context. So there's Canada in the world, sector capitalism, and Canadian imagination. And those of you who are interested in how African Canadians, African Nova Scotians, people of African descent in Canada have engaged in their own self-organization, self-activity to try and transform the world, I encourage you to perhaps purchase a copy of Burnley Rocky Girls Revolutionary, which I think does for the struggle, the Black liberation struggle and the struggle for human rights in Canada, what Stokely Carmichael became Kwame Ture, Ready for the Revolution, does as a memoir for that in the United States. And also, we have Got Blood to Give, Anti-Black Homophobia and Blood Donation, a recently published book by Dr. Omisore Jaiden, the outgoing James Robinson Chair of Black Canadian Studies, right? So there's a number of exciting things, and of course, part of the struggle is an intellectual struggle, and publishers such as Fanon provide that space and that instrument by which we carry on these issues. Before I read the biography about our two participants here will engage in this wonderful dialogue and conversation, I'd like to point out a series of questions have been prepared for them that they will expand on. They will engage in a conversation for half an hour to 45 minutes, and then the floor will be open to a question and answer period. This discussion, this dialogue is critically important given the times we're living in, right? We see the climate change and the threat to humanity. We see growing global inequality. We also see the danger of world war, right? And we see the plundering of the global south, and so on. And we see a world increasingly centered openly and nakedly around capital and profit making, which completely denies and is at war with the human. This event, I think, is also important because it takes place in 2025, a year with numerous anniversaries, right? This will be the 50th anniversary of the defeat of U.S. imperialism in Vietnam, unification of Vietnam. It will also be the 70th anniversary of the famous Bandung Conference held in Indonesia, which initiated the Third World Project, which eventually radicalized into tricontinentalism, right? It's the 50th anniversary of Cuba's intervention in Southern Africa, which played a decisive role in the destruction of the apartheid state, okay? And it's also the 100th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X and the 60th anniversary of his assassination, and of course the 100th anniversary of the birth of Frantz Fanon, okay? So critical in these struggles. Malcolm X and Frantz Fanon are almost like twins in terms of their commitment to the struggle and their meaning, not only for Black liberation, but human liberation as a whole. Malcolm X was a trenchant and uncompromising critique of capitalism and imperialism at the end of his life, right? And it's quite clear that, as he said, with all the problems we see unfolding in the world, that we see the chickens coming home to roost. Frantz Fanon, okay, I noted very clearly in the Wretched of the Earth, when it comes to you, the young people who are here, that it is your duty, unfortunately, your responsibility falls on your shoulders to transform the world. And he said, each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Okay? And I think that's a critical task that faces young folks. But he also put out a challenge. What matters is not to know the world, but to change it. And I think that is perhaps one of the most important principles for us actually to engage in a discussion here. So we are going to be joined by two eminent intellectuals, okay, eminent activists, eminent thinkers, intellectuals. Everyone is an intellectual. everyone is an activist. We believe in organic intellectuals. So, Mireille Fanon France is the director of the France Fanon International Foundation. As a jurist, she has written numerous articles on human rights and international humanitarian law, on the process of racialization and discrimination, on the coloniality of power. With a literary background, she taught literature and national education and didactics at the Continuing Education Center of the University of Paris, Descartes, and was invited by numerous universities as visiting professor, including that of California at Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, on questions of international law and she's also worked for UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, and for the French National Assembly. In 2009, she received the Human Rights Prize for the Council for Justice, Equality and Peace. Since 2011, she has been an expert in the United Nations working on people of African descent, of which she was chair from 2014 to 2016. So it is a great honor, a great privilege. We are deeply humbled to have you in our presence. Joining the conversation with her is Dr. Sherry Eugene, a colleague of mine in the Black and African Diaspora Studies, who shares my sense of humor, but not my frenetic and hectic dramatic characteristics. Dr. Eugene, recognized as one of the global top 100 most influential people of African descent in politics and government, is a cross-appointed professor, assistant professor in Black and African Diaspora Studies and the Department of Political Science at Dalhousie University. And I should add, the Black and African Diaspora Studies program is the first and still the only one of its kind in Canada. Dr. Eugene's research takes up the historical struggles for reparations by conceptualizing it as a liberation praxis for conquest, enslavement, colonialism, and neocolonialism in New World making in the Caribbean context. It proposes a decolonial reparations framework that seeks to delink the demands for reparations from neoliberal epistemologies and mechanisms that perpetuate the continuation of neocolonial governmentalities in the Caribbean. Additionally, his research explores the role of the arts and social movements in the politicization and mobilization of young people in the Caribbean and its diasporas on the issue of reparatory justice. His only failing is that he's not a Manchester United supporter. So, the floor is yours.
Hyping this talk up. I'm very thankful to give him Mireille for being here with us. I had the last just under 10 years now of knowing Mireille, and we've done work in different spaces. We're part of a few organizations, international human rights organizations. So very thankful for her to be here. And as Isaac mentioned, we're talking about reparations, decolonization, and new world. But before we get into that, I want to ask you one question just to get to know the person, right? You, the person. So for my first question, no. Well, I give you the bio, but in the sense of like the journey into the work that you do, right? So how did you become involved in the work of Black liberation?
And I will just I think the first time I think I have to do something, I was really young. I think I was around 8. And for the first time in my life, I listened to some friends, same age than me, saying nigger. And as I was in the white environment, I said, wow, I am nigger. I did not realize I was nigger, even if I know my father was black, but you know how the children are. They could see their father or mother black, but they did not realize themselves as black. And I was really surprised, and I went back to a person. I said, well, he said nigger, and he told me, oh, he is racist. And the French who were living in the same area as me were racist. And it is the first time I realized, and I've never heard about this term racism before. And I said, oh, I remember I said something like that, oh, but it's not good. We have to do something, it's not good. Something like that. I was a child that would do.
Okay. So what, thank you for that.
It's a kind of answer.
No, most definitely it opens the door for another question. So what did that intervention look like? So when you mentioned you needed something had to be done, like what action was done?
At the moment, I have no clue.
Okay, that's understandable, but thank you for that in regards to, so that was the introduction.
It went to my mind later.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So that's the only question I have
When
about
I was,
myself.
but not so, not, I was not so older, because I was living in a very reactionary area, and it was just the end of the liberation, Algerian liberation war, and all the people with who I was in school, their parents were totally pro-France, pro-colonial state, and from my side, those people I know were against, anti-colonial. And I was not so old, and I understand there is something wrong, and so what does mean politics, racism, colonialism. It was the first time I realized when I was a little bit older, but around 12, something like that.
Thank you for that. I have one more question around that thing. Now, my students will know, they call it, I'm a big France Fanon. I think what they call it is a fanboy.
Yeah.
So I put myself in that category, but I'm just really curious, what was growing up with France, your father? What was that like? I mean, I know we could speak of the icon now, but what was that interaction like? Especially when you mentioned about you went to your father and you told him about the use of the N word, and you mentioned that and it was that racist. What was
It was not him.
It wasn't him? Okay, cool. Kind of like ignorance. So then, thank you for that. So that's the second question I want to ask you. Now I'm going to shift the area on reparations now. Your father, Franz Fanon, argued that colonialism inflicted deep structural and psychological damage on the colonized. How should reparations address not only economic injustices, but also the long-term psychological and cultural harm caused by colonialism? So, big question I know.
And also sorry for those who were there this morning, because I will repeat some. How I could say that? Where is it? This one. Okay. First of all, I think we have to be very clear on what means for Franz Fanon Foundation reparation, because there is a lot of interpretation, and for us it is collective political reparation, not individual, and not in terms also of money. Reparation is what happened. Excuse me, I need to enter in the problematic. If we are going back to 52, there was a papal bull saying we are obliged to Christianize all these Islam, Arab people, African people. We need to Christianize them, and for that I allow everybody doing that to do what is necessary to do by any means possible. And then the second position was to say, okay, as now you Christianize these people, you have the obligation to keep their land, whatever the type of lands, islands, territory, dominion, but you have to keep this land, and this land from this period will belong to the King Alphonse V. It was the first aggression against humanity, because they officially said, the church said, there is people able to live as a being, and there is all other people are non-being, and now these people, the non-being, are considered now as terrorists, something like that. So it is a kind of new epistemology of humans since 2001. And the second step was the doctrine of the discovery, following by the doctrine of plantation. And I admitted the difference between indigenous and black people and African people. And at the moment, the white people have decided to select certain person and to organize a transatlantic trade slave, you know that, and enslavement and colonization. And first step, church decided to, and the second, the kingdom, the European kingdom, decided to discovery and to take natural resources, goods, etc., and decide to use African people as enslaved people. And if I say enslaved is not slavery, enslaved suppose they lose their identity, their names, their humanity, and they become furniture. And it was conceptualized by the Black Code. I don't know if you know the Black Code from Colbert. And they were, there is an article 5, saying slave people are furniture. It means their lives does not belong to them, but to their slave masters. And we need to going back to this history. And this history of doctrine of discovery and doctrine of plantation is following by the third step with colonization of African continent, and with separation between colonizer in Berlin in 1887. That's right. 1887. And and then it was followed by another step. It is the decolonization movement, beginning with Bandung Conference in 1955. And we need to understand that if we want to work on reparation, because we can consider reparation as a just individual obligation from former colonized state to pay some money to the ancestor of enslaved people. But what we want to do, what we want to achieve, and I'm going back to the quote, Fanon quote, for young people, each generation has to, etc., etc. Because what it was done at the moment of this 15th century, it was the breakdown of how was the humanity until then. Certainly there is fight between the tribes or between kingdoms, that's for sure, but there was not such kind of enslavement. There is slavery, of course, for war reason. Slavery also between Europeans in the south of Europe, slavery in Africa, slavery Arab trade slave, etc. Of course, there is that, but it's absolutely nothing to do with enslavement. It was a really a particular way to consider human, and also to destroy the sense of alterity, the sense of intersubjectivity, and the sense also of humanity. And what we have to do with reparation is not to get money back, but it's just to redress the sense of humanity. And if we want reparation also, it's not only for that, but also it is because we know capitalist system, liberal capitalist system, is based on race, on the use of race, even if it is a socially construct, for sure, but race is an element, component of capitalist system, and if we want tackle seriously racism, institutional racism, we need to change the paradigm of domination based on the capitalist liberal system. And that is why, that is one of the reasons reparation is really an important issue. It's not something to, like a vengeance, or to get, who knows exactly what is the price for our ancestors, and even it's ignominy, it's insane to consider they can give us back money for our ancestors. It's not the purpose. The purpose is really to change the sense of humanity and to abolish the systems who create enslavement and create institutional racism, domination, violence. Because what it was done when the enslaved was on the plantation, what it was also put in place at this moment, there is two things put in place, more than two, but two essential issues. They were, the slave master were continuously attacking the enslaved for any reason. They are not working enough, they are take too much time to do something, or their wife, their children, they make their life really like nothing, zero, no possibility to have a relation, and therefore to maintain their effort of dominate the enslaved people, they institutionalize the endless war against people. And if we could see now how the capitalist system is also acting with this endless war against migrants, against black people, and we can see just a number of incarcerated black people, dropout school black people, health problem for black people, etc. And this is a kind of endless war inside our state, but also it is outside our state. When the US go to Iraq or Afghanistan, it is also based on this concept of endless war against people, just to show they are fighting terrorism, and they can do that where they want, with any means they want, etc. And what happened to Palestine, to Palestinian people, it is exactly the same thing. Since 78 years, they are suffering of endless war. And it is possible because the capitalist system is based on that. Race, endless war. It is organized like that. And there is another thing very important, because also it explains where we are where we are working on the issue of international law, international humanitarian law. We could see how this law since years and years is totally violated, and violated by those who normally are there to protect them. For example, the United Nations. United Nations is really a part of our problem.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, if you know, and if you remember, against racism, there were actually 3 decades against racism per se. Nothing happened, of course. And even now it's growing more. And also there is one decade for people of African descent. Who knows that here?
Yes.
Who knows that? How many? Okay, very few people. It's normal. It's absolutely unknown.
Yeah.
It's
I didn't know
absolutely
that until
unknown.
this year.
And because it was so successful, of course it was really successful, they have decided last
To do
2
it.
months ago
To
to
do
renew
it again.
the decade, a second decade for people of African descent. No, it's terrific. You know how they want to tackle structural racism. Though I am losing because it's like a joke. It's like a joke because I am joking, but in fact it's just to feel painful and to feel shame, because who is suffering of structural racism, institutional racism? Who is suffering? Is not those who are at the United Nations. Is not. If international law, humanitarian international law is violated, who is suffering? Is not those who are at the United Nations. And normally they have to protect the principle of the UN Charter, and they don't. They don't. It is cynical. We have to understand it is really cynical. And what it was more cynical, and we have to understand where is coming this cynicism. This cynicism is coming when, during the time of abolition, was decided, certain states decided to give money to compensate, and we could think they will compensate the victims. No, they compensate the slave owner because they lose their force of work. That's all. And it is very interesting because in doing that, they institutionalize the violation of the concept impunity. Because normally, when you commit, because enslavement, colonization, colonialism are based on crimes, genocide, with people, with indigenous people and people of African descent, and crimes against humanity. And Aimé Césaire said less humanity. I don't know how to translate less humanity. Less humanity.
I think the thingification.
Yeah.
The thingification. Yeah.
The
Thingification.
The signification.
Yeah. Thing, like thingification. So the less humanity.
There is no, and even the victim, it was not sufficient for the capitalist system. It was not sufficient to compensate the criminals. As soon, the day after the abolition, there was, in France and in different countries, they edit a law, or decret of law, saying any former, not former enslaved, but just new free, any new free found without money in the street, directly to jail.
Yeah.
No other, and therefore, for the new free, the only solution for them to not be put in jail was to go back to the plantation and to become a precarious worker for their former enslavers. And it is, I don't know if you say that, but it is an inversion of la version de la charge in law.
Liberation?
Huh?
Yeah, inversion, that is the word.
Inversion.
Inversion of
Charges.
the criminal.
Of the burden, I think. Inversion of the burden.
Okay. In French, it's an inversion de la charge, and it was for the enslaved people. They have to make the proof they are not. We could say now terrorists or migrants. They have to make this proof, but without paper, without name, as you know, I'm sure. For example, for our island, it took more than two years for all the enslaved people to get a name and surname. A lot of them after abolition were without name, because the city mayor has no time to treat all these people. That is why it's when we are talking, we need reparation. It includes all of that. Not only reparation for the time of enslavement, but it includes all this fundamental basis of the organization of enslavement, and our society is based on enslavement, on what it was put in place at the moment of enslavement. And I think it makes some difference between reparation for healing, because the people think also, if we don't get reparation, I will continue to feel uncomfortable, to feel alienated. That's true, but I could say, as a daughter of a psychiatric, I could say, if it is at this level, it's better to go and see and to ask an appointment with a psychologist or psychiatric, rather to ask reparation, because reparation, individual reparation will never change the paradigm of capitalist system. And what we need, even now when we are in a faced to the chaos or the coming chaos, or big change, we need to think about what could be an alternative without this capitalist liberal racial system. We put part of humanity in enslavement, and we continue to put humanity part in not in enslavement, but in genocide now. But also, if you remember what happened for young migrants from a sub-Saharan country, when they arrived in Libya, you remember? There was a place where certain of them were sold as slaves, and it was 4 years, 5 years ago, not so long. That is why we need to change this paradigm of domination, because in the mind of the people, in the mind of the dominant, and we could see how act now Elon Musk or Trump, it is exactly the same thing. I can do what I want because I am the master. It is not because they are rich, of course, but they consider themselves as a master, and us that, as Fanon said, inessential. We are inessential for them. For their system, we are totally inessential. And if they consider we are really inessential, they could do what they want. Absolutely what they want.
Okay, thank you for that. I had several questions, but you answered a few of them. Most of them, I would say, the reparations piece. So that's, you talk about international law, how we're thinking and constructing reparations from the history to the contemporary to the modern contemporary. And there's a few points that you made. So I want to be the devil advocate, right? You mentioned that, well, I'm not the devil advocate, but I think it's a good question to ask, because we have those various movements and various articulations of reparative justice. So in your definition, or articulation, or in your thought process, I would say in how we could think about reparative justice, you talk about this, goes back to the new world making and the transforming, right? Destroying systems, etc. And as the father would say, a new kind of humanity building from Europe. So what about people, for example, from like the ADOS movement in the US, so American descendants of slavery, who are advocating for a material form of reparative justice that's not linked to transformative changes. And we could also make the same argument for spaces in Canada and in the Caribbean as well. So if you South Africa and South America as well, even when you think about Colombia, Brazil, etc. So what are your thoughts on that?
But I will answer the same.
Well, no, but I mean, like in the sense of, because wouldn't you also recognize that as a case for reparation for, like, looking at particular historical injustice? So you might have a group of people that say, you know, my community was destroyed. Like, for example, in Nova Scotia, I think we had this conversation about Africa, right? So, because I agree with you, but I feel like it takes away from reparation for a particular incident to a larger conversation around decolonization. So then how we, for people that are seeking reparation for a particular industry, a particular crime against humanity, like, would you support something like this? Or does it have to be in conversation of new world making altogether?
But it depends on what you want. If you want to just continue the world where we are, okay, go to reparatory justice. Because in no way they are the will to tackle institutional and structural racism with reparatory justice. And if you have followed what happened in South Africa, they organized truth and reconciliation. It was done also in Rwanda. It was done also in former Balkan, but nothing changed. And particularly in South Africa, where apartheid, and when we discuss with South African citizens, they said, okay, apartheid is ended, but it's not true. We are still under apartheid law because we are still stigmatized as a Negro the relation of power did not change, even if there is a bourgeoisie, a black bourgeoisie now, but the relation of power did not change. The productive means belongs to white people, and the land also belongs to white people. And that is why Ramaphosa decided to change something about land restitution. But it is the same thing in Colombia. They have a law, a 70 law, from 1974, something like that, on the land restitution. But it was never applied. And this is one of the questions. You gave me this morning a paper of one of your colleagues, I think.
Michelle Williams, Reparations.
And she notes something interesting. She notes the law. Of course, the law is there, but the difficulty begin when those of whom the rights are violated ask for the application of law. And it is exactly that. The law is there everywhere, but the law is done for not be applied. And who decides that? It's not the victim, it's the system. Even if not the judge, I could say, it's not really the judge, the system imposes them to do that in terms of land restitution. And we could see that in our country. I show him because he's from Guadeloupe and I am from Martinique, and we have some years. His island was colonized a little bit before Martinique. Yeah. 10 years, something, 10 years like that. But it's very interesting because there was in the French newspaper this weekend, there was a very interesting newspaper, and I went to Martinique to study that. But I did not, it was so difficult to get information, but I was sure there was something like that. And suddenly it appeared. And it's very interesting. In fact, between 60 and 17, there was a massive jobless in Martinique and Guadeloupe, French Guyana and La Réunion. And one of our ministers at the moment said, okay, we will organize a bureau of and we are French citizens since 1789. But at the moment, this bureau, the name of the bureau was Bureau of Migration of Overseas Department. Okay? We were considered as migrants. Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah. And now, and they empty our country because it concerns almost 600,000 people from all the islands, and at the moment they give them one ticket, one simple flight ticket, no return, and also the hope to have a good work form of training. But it was not the case. They became housekeeping for women, or cleaning hospital, and also plumber, something, but very low level of formation. And they have no possibility to come back because they never get enough money to come back to the land. And also you have to understand, in our land there is actually, for young people from 18 to 24, the rate of jobless is 60%. 60%. But the rate at the national level is 11%. Okay? And this weekend, doing that, they empty our country. But of course, there were nobody to work for the public service because they prefer to send the Martiniquais, Guadeloupe, etc., to send them in France rather than to train them to endorse the possibility to become a civil servant. And doing that, they ask to black people, they offer to black people, to white people, sorry, they offer to white people to come in Martinique, Guadeloupe, La Réunion, Guyane, blah, 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 and to endorse this civil servant work. Okay? But it's not enough. This weekend, in the newspaper, we discovered not only they have a good job, they could buy lands, and as a Martiniquais, Guadeloupe, to buy a land now, it's really difficult, and it is our land, obtained by crime and stolen. And they give some facilities, but very important facility, to these white people to buy land, to get funds to health assurance, to get funds to take care of their children, to get funds to get good education for their children, and to get funds to have a good position. But in the same time, in Martinique, Guadeloupe, these young people are without job, just waiting, and of course, as they are waiting, using drugs, and therefore put in jail. And when they contest and when there is social riots, as it was one or 2 months ago, for economical reason, they put their leader in jail, because it's better to put them in jail than to solve the solution. It's just to give an example to how they proceed, how the system is proceeding. It's not only Macron or whatever, it is a system. We have to also to not make individual responsibility. It's a collective responsibility from their side also, but it's a system doing, imposing them that we don't need to lose the money of our state for these people. They don't count. They never count for us, they don't count. And we have to maintain them in invisibility. That is why when there is a second decade, when the first decade was a disaster, to renew the decade is really cynical. I'm sorry. I know you love the decade.
No, listen. Not really, but I have more questions, but I feel like we haven't even passed reparations.
No, I will ask you one question.
Uh-huh.
As there is nothing happening, and believe me, at the moment I was expert at the UN, and if there is a decade, it's because one of my colleagues and I, we insist to have a decade, because we were totally naive. And what we suggest as a term to identify the decade was reparation, justice, development. But of course, we know reparation will never be admitted. And it was the case. They told us, okay, we would like to have a decade, but if you don't change this world, you will never get a decade. And we change by recognition. And I argue about recognition. Because recognition also, philosophically speaking, also is a concept very ironic and very capitalist in certain way. Because you can recognize someone, okay, I will recognize you, but as soon you do something, it makes me unhappy, I will say, okay, I stop with my recognition. I don't recognize you now. No, it's not possible. I try to do my best to change you. You don't want to be changed? Okay, we stop. And it is exactly what's happened. With Palestinian is exactly that. You don't want the Oslo agreement. It's a beautiful agreement. You don't want Oslo agreement? No? Okay. You're a terrorist. And you will fight. And we will fight you. It is that. It is exactly. We have to understand the cynicism of this system. It's not only something like a joke or something like that, but it is really cynical. And it is irreasonable. You can explain rationally, you can explain their choice. You can just explain how it works. And how it works, explain where we are. And to have some autocrat like we have now, all around the world, is something totally normal. Because the system is in danger. The financial capitalist system is in danger. But they have to deploy more and more forces to protect it. And this protection, it has the dépend. Au dépend. Hein?
It depends.
No, au dépend de. Contre, okay. This protection is against the people, against all the people. That's the problem. It is, and it is exactly what happened, what have been happening during enslavement, colonization, and colonialism.
Thank you. I have one more question on the reparations piece. Right? I know we probably have 20 minutes before, but because you've kind of diagnosed and you described the system, etc., and you highlighted the UN piece. So your time working with the UN, right, under a working group of experts of people of African descent, which is independent of the UN, what global strategies have proven most effective in advancing the movement?
From the UN?
No, from the, what have you seen, not from the UN, but what have you seen through the participation in the working group, but just in various spaces in your everyday? Because you talk about the diagnosis, you give the diagnosis, I should say, and the symptoms of the system of exploitation, etc. And a framework would be, but what have you seen in various spaces? Have you seen anything?
Exactly this. It's terrible because you could go in UK, or in Brazil, in Colombia, or the country where our working group organized country visit, for example. It is what we want. It's exactly the same analysis. We don't have something really new, but what it changed is the level of violence against people. And for example, in Colombia or in Brazil, the level of violence is really high, even higher than in the US, against people of African, Afro-Brazilian or Afro-Colombian. But I never heard something really. I never heard. And even, for example, I will give you an example to see the level of, so for me, of misunderstanding of what is going on by the UN. And when you are, because it was not my choice, someone applied for me. And I was happy. I said, okay, good. I will see from inside if there is something to do. And maybe we can change, you see. You are always stupid. They will change the world. Oh, it's quite good. But in fact, this morning, because there is some thinking at the UN level who is very, very strange for me. for example, when they say, okay, a decade for women, a decade for children, a decade for black people, a decade for peasants, a decade for indigenous, a decade for this and this. But why the UN is dividing the people? Because the first sentence of the UN Charter is we, people of nation. We are just one people of nations. We are not people divided women, transgender, whatever. It's also counterproductive because they divide also the people. And one of the terms for me was very important is racism, because of course it's coming from race, and we know exactly the use of race as a means to hierarchize humanity. We know that, but it's okay. But when you, with the time, this concept of racism include all kind of racism, gender, homophobia, grossophobia, Islamophobia, blah blah. But what about black people? Where are black people in this generalization of this concept? Where is black people? And doing that, even the UN is participating in the invisibilization of black people. And when you told them, but black people, where are black people? There is no term to speak about black people. And we suggest, because I met some organization in Belgium, and we were talking about that, and one of the organizations were working on that since a long time, and they suggest negrophobia. And I went back to the UN and I said, okay, there is negrophobia. Oh, negrophobia is too hard, it's too related to nigger. And one of them also say, okay, but there is an alternative, there is Afrophobia. And I said, okay, we can use Afrophobia. And they said, great to redo that. And they were very happy to have a word. And I asked them to include in the presentation of the working group, to write it on the paper. Yes, we will do. I left in 2017, and this for 2 years after disappeared. Totally disappeared. And I met the responsible of the anti-discrimination unit, and 2 years ago, and I asked him, what happened with the word Afrophobia? It disappeared. We are still invisible, what does it mean, etc. And he said, no, but it's difficult, you see, it's so difficult. You see how even the UN is a part of our problem. Because they participate by their inaction, or even some complicity, they participate to the problem. And we have to fight. That's why this experience for me was, I could say, the most horrible of my life. Because you know you are not here for you. You are here because there is a people excluded, marginalized, racialized, killed because their color. And you know, doing that, you know, acting like that, you know the UN will not solve the problem. And we have to fight against the UN. And that for me is totally something schizophrenic. Really, it made me totally crazy. And I was so happy to live.
Thank you.
It's terrible to have to say that. It's terrible. For me, it's something. It's a defeat. It is a defeat. The system is defeating. but defeating himself.
Okay. I have a follow-up question, but I think I'll pause it. Just so you know, I had like 19 questions prepared.
We see them.
We covered 2. but I asked 2, but you covered several of the questions until now. But I want to go into something, before we go into the Q&A, there's something I think that's very important that we need to discuss. Actually, the 18th question. Alright? It's on Haiti. And you have a copy of the report somewhere. Yeah. I think we need to discuss Haiti. And if you could, 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes. So give me the very quick question. 10 minutes just to respond what I'm going to ask. Right? So in 2023, the France Fanon Foundation and the International Coalition for People of African Descent organized a mission to Haiti. So could you share with us the purpose, the objectives, and the outcomes of that mission?
Oh my gosh,
In
no.
10 minutes. I believe in you.
Oh, you don't do that, don't
No,
do
but
that.
I think it's important. No, it's important, but there's
No,
people
it is
that-
important,
yeah.
but maybe we can do that differently.
Okay, well, let's talk about the mission next.
Just
the mission.
why there is a mission? It was at the initiative of the French Foundation. I suggest that to IPAD and to PCL, also from Colombia, to organize a mission because I was absolutely upset with what all the people, and even the left, the people from the left, or from all around the world, when we talk about Haiti, the first thing of, oh my God, poor Haiti, poor Haiti. It's so painful, it's so painful. No, it's not poor Haiti, and it's not painful. It's painful for Haitian people, of course, but not for us. And at the moment I said we need to go and to exactly understand the situation and also to echo the voice of Asian people. Because there is people, a lot of people resisting in Haiti. And they resist every day. Every day. Not only because actually there is a gang in a large part of Port-au-Prince, but since the creation of Haiti, they have to fight against colonizers, against the French, against first of all against colonizer and slaver, after against French, and we have to keep in mind the French state obliged Haiti to sign illegal debt, and the way they got this signature for this illegal debt is also very interesting because it's exactly what's happening in Palestine now. Le baron, ouais, je crois que c'est le baron Marc, I don't remember. The Macron, it's a military, a number of military in France, and the king at the moment sent him to Haiti, and Charles X, it was the king, and he sent him to Haiti, asking him to force the president of Haiti to sign this illegal debt. And he went with a fish, with a lot of armada, like an armada, fish, not fish.
An army is
Boat,
big
boat.
army.
It's armada.
It's just armada, yeah. Not fish, sorry. and he made the siege of Port-au-Prince during 15 days, saying if we don't sign, I will bomb. Okay, exactly what's happened in Palestine when the Netanyahu said, now leave this part of Gaza Strip because we will bomb, and they bomb. It is exactly the same thing. But at the end, they did not bomb because the president signed the letter of with this illegal debt. And then after that, it's not enough. It's never enough. When the American arrived and occupied Haiti in 1915, during 15 years, the year before their arrival, they went in Haiti because they were fighting with German people, and they stole all the gold in the Asian bank. And therefore, in the same period, Haiti lose this illegal debt and lose the gold from their bank. And the nightmare for Haiti began because they have to pay the debt. And not only that, but the US was always behind Asian people, and they decide also to select, and who the Asian people has to select as a president. It was decided by the US. But right now, who decides to name this person's prime minister? It's not Asian people. It's a core group. And in the core group, there is US, France, Brazil, and one African country. And what also, how they solve the problem of gang, because the gang are not coming from nowhere. They are coming from this occupation, and particularly from the US occupation, when they have decided to change the tax system, and also to secure, because they love the security, law and order, they love that, and they maintain their force to secure the street. But until now, they try to do that, but it was not really US, but they were behind, and they sent some peacekeeper, UN peacekeeper. We know what happened after the earthquake in 2010, we know exactly. And then, now the US decided to send, and the UN, with the agreement of the UN, they sent a police force, but this police force is not white. It's very interesting also. It's black. Black coming from Kenya, mainly from Kenya. And we have to understand why. And that is why also I said to my colleague, we need to understand why they want that. And it's very clear, if there is a genocide or crimes committed by black, they will say, okay, black to black. We are not responsible for that. We know how they are. If it is white to black, it's something totally different. Therefore, it's an expression, it's a perfect expression of structural and institutional racism. It's perfect. And that is why I propose to my colleague to organize this mission, and also to break this kind of singing, chanson. No, not singing. Song. Thank you. It's a kind of song of poor Haiti. No, people of Haiti are resisting. Resisting, really, daily they are resisting. And of course, certain of them resist against gang, but it's normal, because it is their life, and they fight. And right now, there is a lot of tension inside the streets of Haiti. And we have to understand also where it's coming from. Why the gang? The gang were put in place by the former president Duvalier, because he used them to renew his mandate. And they growing up, and even Aristide. When Aristide, one of the reasons Aristide was put out of the country, it was extracted of the country. It was because also he used gang, and it was denounced for that. But the white people never denounced Duvalier. Duvalier's father and Duvalier's son, never. And now all this core group also is very has interaction with this gang. And where are coming from the arms? The arms are coming from Florida, from US. Therefore, who is selling the arms? Why there is no interdiction to sell arms to Haiti, to avoid any crimes? There is a lot of things like that, and also there is, between Asian also, there is something very interesting, because we could say, but why, there is a question like that, why black people are fighting each other? Because at the end of the day, they kill black people. Or they rape black people, or they kidnap black people. Why? Because during the enslavement, the slave owner did something, the colonizer did something very perfid. Perfidus? Perfid? You understand?
Perfidy.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's perverse. It's to, the people coming from Africans were called bossal. And the peoples who were born in Haiti by rape, after rape, were called Creole. And the Creole were used to manage the bossal on the plantation. In certain ways, they were manager of bossal. And bossal, and there is always fight between each other. And this division, it's what it's called the préjugé of color. Well, préjugé, you understand? Prejudice of color. And until now, this prejudice of color is still relevant. It's still dividing the Asian people. And it is something also we have to understand. Where it's coming from. It's not like that spontaneously we hate your neighbor because he has not the same color than you. No, it's coming from this institutionalization of colonizer to use one of part of the black people to manage, to lead the other part of the people because they are more black than you. And it's very perfid, it's very perverse. And until now, it's not changed. That is why Haiti is a very interesting situation. And that is why also there is some, as a question at the end of this report that you can share, because it is in English, you can share with the people if they want. At the end of the report, we made a comment on how it's possible until now there is still this kind of internal racism between Asian people. And it explains the place occupied by gang, because the gang were geographically, the gang are at the level of society. It's bossal, because they are living in slum, but the Creole are living up on the mountain. And this topographic division is still there. We have to understand that. And the gangs are coming from this heritage of Bossan people.
Thank you very much, Mireille. Thank you. And for those of you who might have interest in the reports, just let me know.
Now, before we get into the question and answer, there's a couple of things I have to do. This has been an event primarily put on by the Black and African Diaspora Studies Program, but I also need to thank the Transition Year Program of Dalhousie University, who has provided support in designing flyers as well as providing us with the refreshments we have enjoyed. I also want to thank the International Development Studies Program at Dalhousie University, which provided some funding to support this event, as well as the support provided by the Dean's Office in publicizing the event as well, right? Okay. One point I'd like to make as well, if I may be allowed to as well, is when we talk about Haiti, Haiti being continually punished for what it committed in 1791 by overthrowing slavery, we often have to bear in mind that there's another country, and I'm writing an article on the parallels in the history, Cuba, that has also been punished by US imperialism for actually having done the same thing. And Cuba has perhaps provided the most selfless and disinterested assistance to Haiti in its time of need, right? Imperialism is raging this war against humanity in all of its form, and particularly the former colonized who dare to resist and continue to resist. That being said, after such a rich and powerful, and I think insightful and really apt exchange between our participants here, the floor is open to your questions. Yes, sir.
I've got a question. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was great to see. In terms of decolonization, what are your thoughts around like the AES, the Alliance of Sahelian States in Africa, and their rejection of France and their neo-colonial policies and just, kicking them out?
First of all, you want to take several questions at first or one question at a time? One at a time, okay? Thank you for your question, Albert. And a former student. Okay? You can answer this question.
Good question. For me, it's even if it's very difficult for the country, because at the end it's very difficult for the people, but I think they are right. They are right to claim their total independence and self-determination. And even if you can question the role of Wagner group or military mercenary group, of course we have to. But I think it's a good thing to stop with colonialism. It's not neo-colonialism, it's really colonialism. And I think we have to support them. It's not easy, because of course if we support such states, in France, but for example, you are seen as a terrorist, as a support or Islamist or support of terrorism, and it's not the case. So we can support for certain ethical value and philosophical and political value, but not in terms of military for military reasons. But I think it's time now to change. Even I could say it's time now to go back to Berlin Conference and to change the border. But it's not as coming from us, it's coming from the people. And these 5 states claiming we stop with France colonialism is the first step. They open the door. What will happen now? We will see. But the danger, I think, it's not easy for them, but not because them, but because also there is a war, and particularly in the Democratic Republic of Congo. between Rwanda and Republic Democratic of Congo. I think it will avoid other states to totally support what this 5 states did, and it's really as a French citizen, even if I don't like France. I could say when you listen our president, what he said about Africa is absolutely nonsense. It's a racist comment. Every time it's racist comment, and it's unacceptable because the self-determination and sovereignty, state sovereignty exists, and saying what he's saying against the state is violating their self-determination, and we can't be part of this regression, state regression.
Thank you for that. And I'd just like to add, the Berlin Conference was mentioned, and we're actually living through the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference. It was held from November of 1884 to February of 1885 in Berlin, where the European countries, 14 of them were united in a observer, came together. The partition of Africa without any reference to Africans themselves. And this racist statement of France to Africa, I remember Sarkozy, when he was president, he said in a speech in Africa that Africans are not fully part of history, and so forth. So
No, they are not
fully part of history. They are not fully entered history.
no, I'm sorry, in historians.
Yeah. And anybody else?
No, I think also this year it's the 70th anniversary of Bandung.
Bandung. Yeah, you should look into the Bandung Conference. It is a conference held in Indonesia in 1955, Bandung, Indonesia. It's an important conference.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, it's so quiet. Have you been so mesmerized by the experience? Yes, sir.
Thank you for your talk. I didn't hear everything, but I gather what you were saying is that monetary reparation has its limitations because it reinforces capitalism. And so that's the danger of if we don't concentrate as much on justice, but on the monetary aspects of reparation. And I think there are some good examples that support that view. For example, Namibia,
Yeah.
right? So there was a settlement between the government of Namibia and Germany in recognition of the genocide committed to the Herero. But now the Herero people said the money never arrived.
Of course.
So that's of course is problematic. And but I would like to ask your perspective on Algeria, and I would like to just give you a very brief anecdote. In 1982, I visited Tlemcen, and I camped there on site somewhere there, and there were some young boys, young men coming, and also in town we talked, and they said, "C'est un socialisme des bourgeois." So really, where has this liberation movement of the early days, where has it taken people who have been liberated?
No,
And I really, I like this idea that we need to get on an anti-capitalist path, right? But obviously it didn't happen. So, yet I would also like to say, when I needed medication in Algeria, in Tlemcen, I would just go to a dispensary and I would get it for free. So, but still.
I think I can speak more generally. I think what happened during the movement of decolonization, the country were liberated but not emancipated. So, not emancipated.
Liberated but not emancipated.
And I think there is, and Fanon used to make a difference between liberation and emancipation. And I think what we try to do with reparation also is to get emancipation for the people, but for all the people, black and white, because also as a psychiatrist, he points the structural and institutional racism affects firstly, of course, black people, but also white people, because they are the torturers, perpetrators, and they participate to the crime, and the black people are the victims. That is why we need to work on both sides. And it is also part of reparation. For me, there is no possibility to emancipation our people without also to emancipate the white people.
I know you have a follow-up, but I'd like to give someone. But I'd like to give someone else another chance as well. Sorry, I mean to cut you off, but you know, it's late and so Asha, but we'll get back to you. Nobody else. Asha.
Yeah, this was super interesting, and I have a question for you about legacy, because you both take up aspects of your father's work, but also have created your own path. And I would be interested to hear you talk about negotiating that combination of carrying on work and creating your own path.
What is on path?
Your own journey.
Huh?
Your own journey. So basically,
As
the motive.
every human being, no? Also you create your own journey. It's not different from you.
We will still keep asking.
But it's private.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sometimes it's running.
It's a long story.
Any others? Yes, Gail.
Just curious on your thoughts of the CARICOM reparations framework. What are your thoughts on that? The CARICOM reparations.
CARICOM. Oh, also it's a part of our problem, because when we talk about reparation, is from I don't like civil society. I don't like the system because it's so UN. I think I prefer a social movement. We are talking about social movement. And CARICOM is asking reparation for states. And it is exactly the same issues than Commission for Truth and Reconciliation. Who is the benefactor of that? Who will benefit from the money? Because it's just in terms of money. And what it was very interesting, I don't know if you follow the discussion between CARICOM after they sent the letters to England, Netherlands, France, Spain, I think Portugal. And they received, of course, France did not answer because France is higher than that. But the UK answered, and the first answering was from Tony Blair. And Tony Blair said, okay, we will do something, but we will give money, but we will decide to which program this money will do. It's perfect colonial position. No change. You see, if it's like that, it's not reparation. It's just, it's just like Thatcher said, I want my money back. That's all. And after that, it was David Cameron, and David Cameron said, no way, no money. There is nothing to do with reparation. It's very interesting because I think it's important to have, when we made CARICOM, some years ago, we worked with one of the most well-known people working on reparation, Reparations. And we have a discussion with him in different, in Jamaica, but also in New York. And what I tried to push, it was to say, okay, if you do that as a CARICOM, please include social movement, not only states, but do that with social movement. Otherwise, once again, you will divide the people. And it is exactly that. They divide the people. They will get money for them, their state, and this money, I don't know how much will be, but he has not just it. But we are still in the same logic, capitalist logic. You can solve the problem with money, okay. When you lose your leg because of an accident, okay, you get money, but you don't get back your leg. You are still handicapped. And even if you have money, your life is totally different. If we got money for what they did, what the enslavement did to our ancestors, okay, but it will never change they will never attack or tackle structural and institutional racism. But it is what we want and what we need as a human, what we need to not be considered as non-being. And but it's very difficult. And I would like just to answer to one of your questions because it come to my mind. There is one example, very interesting. It's just happened some months ago, I think 2 months ago, end of 2024. And it's you know the Chagos Island? It's close to Mauritius. Yeah. And I don't know if you follow the history of Chagos Island. And I advise you to buy the book, because there is a book, and written by their lawyer, and it's very interesting to read it as an example of also how to play the game with international law. It's really interesting. And when you work on reparation, it's very useful to read this book. The name is The Last Colony. The Last Colony, and the guy is Philippe. Sorry, maybe it will.
Oh, look at that.
And this island, Chagos, in the 50s, the British Empire has decided to empty this island and to say you have 2 days to leave the island. And these peoples were living there since years and years and years and years. And then, because they need of this island to install American bases, military bases. Good reason. It is the law of the strongest.
Like Diego Garcia, for example.
Like Diego Garcia. And then there was a lady, it's very curious affair. There was a lady, a Chagosian lady. She was shy at the moment. And she did not understand why she has to leave her island. Because when they were forced to leave, her family left everything. They have no right, they have just right 1 luggage per person, that's all. And when she grew up, she was always obsessed with this her island, and I don't know how, but she began to think about how we can go back there. I won't just go back, and she tried to. She was every time she was not able to go, and she went to a lawyer, and the name is he is the grandson of the lawyer in international, the jurist in international law who conceptualized crimes against humanity. His name is Philip
Sands. Philip Sands.
Ah, Sands, thank you.
It's called the last
Colony.
A
Yeah.
journey of exile, justice, and courage.
And
It's just, oh, just one.
it is also interesting because he is the grandson of the one who conceptualized crimes humanities. The name is not Sands, but his grandfather was friends with the one who conceptualized the concept of genocide, Raphael Lemkin. It's very interesting to read, because also there is a book from Philip Sands also on this history of how emerge crimes against humanity and genocide. Go back to the Chagos Island. She went to a lawyer, Philip Sands, and she explained her case. And he was not compassionate, but he was understanding her demand, and he began to work. And year after year after year after year, they were totally disappointed, totally upset, totally blah, 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 blah. Until when, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, the UK justice, the court in UK, said, okay, the Chagos people can go back to their island. And it is beautiful story of kind of reparation, but not exactly reparation, it's restitution. It's restitution, and I think it's the first step, and it makes me have some hope, seeing, okay, if now we can use that as a jurisprudence in the case of Haiti, to obtain the restitution of gold and the amount of illegal debt, maybe we can open something. And I think one of our duty, our obligation, our responsibility, if we are convinced that the issue of reparation is something really important for humanity, the first thing we have to do is to focus on Haiti, to get the restitution of illegal debt and the restitution of the gold stolen by US. What do you think? It's a beautiful project.
Any other questions? Yes. Not a student. Almost. You, right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I see your games going this way. Thank you very much for your presentation and your questions as well. I think somebody in the room was asking about the CARICOM. How would you ensure that the reparations, let's say that goes to the Caribbean, maybe islands like Antigua, maybe not just Antigua, other islands, would actually go to the right place? I know you said that when the UK was donating, they were very specific about where they want it to go, and that's not right. But then at the same time, we have politicians who are also not doing the right thing. How can we ensure that, let's hypothetically say, okay, we're going to get all our money back. How can we ensure it's going to the right place and not just in their pockets?
But I'm not interested by money back. Me personally, and politically, I'm not interested. I'm interested by land restitution, something different, because it's open the issue of reparation, but not money.
Oh.
It's a state problem. We don't need the money. How do you evaluate the price of your ancestor. 1 mule and 42 acres. Excuse me.
Could I have a follow-up question? So what does reparation mean to you?
But no, I don't go back.
Oh,
I explained
sorry,
it.
I know, but it just seemed like it was about money, but then you said it's not quite.
No, I answered the question about CARICOM, and I said it's state reparation. It's not social movement reparation. It's totally different.
So if I may, I remember having conversations with when the CARICOM case came out, there used to be a very famous Caribbean political economist, Norman Govan, who used to come to Halifax, and I used to have conversations with him. And he said, what does money mean if the fundamental economic, social, political situation doesn't change? Okay? So there are some people, like Dr. Chevy, Dr. Eugene, and Professor Fanon, who conceive reparations as a fundamental transformation of society in that sense, right? Involving a multifaceted approach to human healing and so on, right? So there's a revolutionary conception of what reparation means, as opposed to simply some people believe it should just be money, like in some areas.
I suppose I was clear enough to understand if we get money, it's just a liberal way for the former colonizer to solve the problem. But it will not solve our problem. How we stop Afrophobia, Negrophobia, Islamophobia against people, Arabs and black people. How we stop the mass incarceration. Even if Nova Scotia, I read an article where there is a school dropout, mass incarceration. How we stop that? If we get money, they will never stop. Never. They will just reproduce. And they will tell us, okay, stop to claiming end of racism. It's done. We gave you back money. It's enough. Shut up. It is exactly what they will. And we don't want that. We want the end of racial, structural racism and institutional.
So we'll take one more. So it's been a long day. Okay. So we'll take one more question from Bradley D.
Thank you so much for being here. I've taken a lot from this conversation. It's given me a lot to think about.
And hold on. And as those who are leaving, please, if you want, take some drinks, take some of the pastries.
Thank you so
Don't
much.
leave them for the mice. Sorry, Bradley.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm struggling to be concise and succinct with this question. Because if you put into words what I've thought for a very long time, I don't want to just flip the power and have people of color, indigenous people in power perpetuating the same systems of oppression. That's no use to anybody. And you put that in terms of reparations, and I really appreciate that framing. It's been very helpful. My question is, with this, a lot of movements have started to come up, but eventually they become corrupted by the overarching systems that we're in. It starts as a grassroots movement, and it starts to get momentum, there's healing, there's progress, but they become corrupted by, and it's hard to change something when you benefit from it. And in a lot of ways, we've become addicted to the modern world, all of us. So how do we start to take steps uncoupling ourselves from a system that we're benefiting from and also addicted to? And anyway, so it's not an easy question. I've been grappling with this for years now, so I'm just very curious to hear any of your thoughts around it.
I think it could not be an individual project. It's only a collective project, a decolonial and collective project. And also we have to consider it is a collective decolonial project, but unfinished project. Because the money will be always there, and we are weak.
We are weak.
we are weak. The human being is weak, the human being is weak, therefore, but it could be only a collective and decolonial project, where we put in question race and capitalism and gender.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, first of all, a round of applause for two wonderful. I would like to thank once again our sponsors, obviously AFAD, but IDS, the Dean's Office, and the Transition Year Program. I encourage you as you leave to do two things. One, the refreshment.